Hi everyone, here with your weekly reading. I'm using the Shadowscapes Tarot this week. I love this deck, it's really beautiful. So let's see, try to get this somewhat lined up here. Something is moving through the unseen channels of your life right now, and it's carrying a weight that might take your breath away when it finally reaches you. Not because it's devastating, not because it's unwanted, but because it's real in a way that cuts through all the noise and pretense and protection you've been carrying. And when something that real arrives, it doesn't ask permission, it just lands, and you feel it everywhere. You might want to ground yourself before this fully unfolds. This isn't about gentle revelations or soft truths. This is about something raw breaking through the surface, something that's been buried or hidden or held back, finally demanding to be seen and acknowledged. And the intensity of it, the emotional force, it might feel like too much to hold, like your nervous system doesn't quite know how to process the magnitude of what's trying to come through. Some of you might already be sensing this as a tightness in your chest, a pressure behind your eyes, a feeling that you're on the verge of something but you can't quite name it yet. That's not anxiety. That's anticipation. That's your body preparing for an emotional release that's been building for longer than you realize. There is a sense that communication is at the center of this. Words that need to be spoken, truths that need to be shared. And what makes this intense isn't just what might be said, but how long it's been held back, how much energy has gone into not saying it, how much damage the silence has done while everyone involved pretended things were fine or manageable or workable when they really weren't. Um, and when words that have been suppressed for months or years finally break free, they don't come out calmly. They come out with all the accumulated pressure behind them, all the hurt, all the longing, all the frustration, all the love that had nowhere to go. And receiving that kind of intensity, being on the receiving end of someone's full emotional truth, it can feel overwhelming even when it's what you've been wanting. This reflection invites you to consider: what truth have you been bracing yourself to hear? And are you ready to hold it without breaking? It's possible this involves someone who's been distant, someone who pulled back or created space or operated from behind walls you couldn't penetrate. And you might have convinced yourself that their distance meant indifference, that their silence meant you didn't matter, that their choice to protect themselves meant you were easy to walk away from. But what if their distance was never about not caring? What if it was about caring so much that they didn't know how to function with it? Because some people, when they feel something deeply, they retreat, they go quiet, they create distance, not to hurt you, but to protect themselves from the vulnerability of being fully seen in their need. And that strategy, that self protection through withdrawal, it creates devastation for the person being left, but it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about them being terrified of their own depth of feeling. There's also something here about apologies, about someone recognizing the harm their choices caused, even when those choices felt necessary to them at the time, and apologizing, truly apologizing for emotional damage. That requires humility. It requires being willing to be wrong, to admit fault, to see how your self protection created wounds in someone else. And not everyone is capable of that level of accountability. But if this person is approaching that place, if they're preparing to own their part in what broke between you, the apology might be as intense as the original wound. Because real apologies aren't just "I'm sorry." They're "I see what I did. I understand how it affected you. I take responsibility for the pain I caused." And hearing that, receiving that level of acknowledgement after being gaslit or dismissed or told you were overreacting, it can break something open inside you that you didn't know was still sealed. Some of you might experience this through a letter, an email, a voice message that you almost don't listen to, a text that comes through at an unexpected hour. And the content of that communication, whatever form it takes, it might shatter every assumption you've been operating under, every story you told yourself about why things happened the way they did, every conclusion you reached to make sense of the senseless. It can seem as if one message, one conversation, one moment of raw honesty has the power to rewrite the entire narrative you've been living in. And that rewriting, that sudden shift in understanding, it's disorienting. It makes you question everything, not just about them, but about yourself, about what you missed, about what you misinterpreted, about what was real and what was performance. This reflection invites you to consider if everything you believed about why this person pulled away turned out to be wrong, how would that change what you're willing to consider now? There's also the possibility that the intensity comes from your own emotions finally having permission to surface because you might have been holding it together, staying strong, being rational, managing your feelings so you could function and work and maintain relationships and appear fine to the outside world. But that containment, that constant management of your emotional reality, it takes a toll. And when something happens that gives you permission to stop performing strength, to actually feel what you've been suppressing, the release can be explosive. Crying isn't weakness. Breaking down isn't failure. Feeling the full weight of your grief or anger or longing or confusion, that's not losing control. That's finally being honest. And the intensity of emotions that have been denied or minimized or pushed aside, when they finally get acknowledged, it can feel like drowning. But it's not drowning, it's purging. It's your system releasing what it could no longer carry. It may feel as though you're being asked to make a decision you're not ready to make. That whatever's coming, whatever's being revealed or offered or confessed, it's going to require a response, a choice, a commitment or a rejection. And the pressure of that, the weight of knowing your next move matters, that what you say or do will determine the trajectory of something significant. That pressure can feel paralyzing. But here's what's true. You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to have clarity right away. You're allowed to sit with intensity without resolving it. You're allowed to feel everything that's coming up without immediately knowing what it means or what to do about it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be present with the bigness of what's unfolding without rushing to closure. Some of you might also be experiencing this around family, around a parent or sibling or someone whose opinion or presence has shaped you in fundamental ways. And what's coming might be a truth about your history, about dynamics you thought were normal but actually weren't, about harm that was done that you've been minimizing or excusing, about love that was conditional or withheld or weaponized. And recognizing those things, seeing your past clearly for the first time, it can feel like the ground disappearing beneath you, like everything you built your identity on was constructed on faulty foundation. And that realization, while ultimately liberating, is initially devastating because it means grieving not just what you didn't have, but what you thought you had. This reflection invites you to consider what truth about your past or your relationships would be hardest to face, and is that truth already trying to surface? There's something about timing here that feels significant, not because certain moments are fated, but because there's a ripeness to things, a point where what's been building finally peaks, where pressure that's been mounting finally finds release. And you might be at that point now, where whatever's been brewing beneath the surface can no longer stay contained, where the lid that's been held down is about to blow off. And when that happens, when intensity that's been suppressed finally erupts, it's not neat, it's not controlled, it's messy and overwhelming and sometimes destructive in the way that forest fires are destructive, clearing out dead wood, making space for new growth. Necessary but brutal. Some of you might feel scared of the intensity, scared that if you let yourself feel the full weight of what's there, you won't be able to come back from it. That you will be changed in ways you can't predict or control. And that fear is valid because you will be changed. You can't meet something this big and remain the same. But change doesn't mean broken. Change doesn't mean destroyed. Changed means transformed. And transformation, while uncomfortable, is how we evolve. It can seem as if you're being asked to trust a process you don't understand, to surrender to feelings you've been avoiding, to let something intense move through you without knowing if you'll survive it intact. And that's terrifying, especially if you've built your safety around emotional control, around not being too much or feeling too deeply or needing too openly. But what if your capacity to feel intensely is actually your strength? What if the depth of your emotional experience is what makes you human and connected and alive? What if the intensity you're afraid of is actually what you've been craving all along, is less than #0? 5# is greater than permission to feel fully without apology or restraint. Um, because we live in a culture that tells us to tone it down, to be reasonable, to not make things difficult or uncomfortable, to manage our emotions so others don't have to deal with them. And in that constant modulation, in that perpetual self-editing, we lose access to our own truth, to our own power, to our own aliveness. This reflection invites you to consider, what would it mean to let yourself feel everything that's coming without trying to control or diminish it? There's also the reality that intensity isn't always negative, that the message or truth or experience that's approaching might be overwhelmingly positive, might be the answer to something you've been asking for, might be the relief you've been desperate for. And joy, especially unexpected joy, especially joy that arrives after prolonged pain can be just as overwhelming as grief, because your nervous system doesn't always distinguish between good intensity and bad intensity. It just registers intensity. And if you've been in survival mode for a long time, if you've been braced for impact, your system might struggle to accept something good, might wait for the catch, might prepare for the other shoe to drop even when the moment is genuinely beautiful. So as this unfolds, as whatever message or truth or experience is approaching finally arrives, try to stay present. Try to breathe. Try to let it be as big as it needs to be without immediately trying to make it smaller or more manageable. Give yourself permission to be moved, to be undone, to fall apart if that's what needs to happen. Because falling apart isn't the end, it's often the beginning. The cracking open that allows something new to enter, the breaking down of old structures that no longer serve so new ones can be built. And while it's painful and disorienting and scary, it's also sacred. It's also necessary. It's also exactly what your soul has been asking for, even when your mind has been resisting it. And if you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. If you need to sit in silence for hours processing what just hit you, do that. There's no right way to move through intensity. There's just your way. The way that honors what's true for you in the moment, without judgment or comparison or expectation. You're stronger than you know, more resilient than you give yourself credit for. And whatever's coming, whatever intensity is about to break through, you can hold it. You can survive it. And you can let it transform you into someone more whole, more authentic, more fully yourself than you've ever been. Stay grounded, stay open, and trust that you're ready for this, even if you don't feel ready. Because readiness isn't about confidence, it's about capacity. And you've been building capacity through everything you've already survived. This is just the next chapter, and it's going to be intense, but you've got this. This reflection invites you to consider, when this intensity finally arrives and moves through you, who will you be on the other side of it?